G'day, welcome to Market Sam After Work. Today I've got a rifle in front of us that I'm about to do a little bit of work with. Yes, it's the Ruger RPR. Now it's something that I should go into right at the beginning. It's something that it's obviously been out for a fair while. The RPR in various forces, or the Ruger precision rifle, has been out in for a fair while. It's something that I've seen very good results, or people talk about it as to shooting very accurately. I've sort of not liked some of the design features that I've seen in this rifle, but it's not something I've been able to talk about or compare in any fashion because it hasn't been legal for sale in Western Australia. You couldn't, I shouldn't say for sale, it hasn't been legal for licensing in Western Australia. But I thought, listen, I'll combine a couple of things. I've got the 6.5 PRC, which seems to be gaining in popularity and working quite well, which I hadn't done anything, and there's reason for not having done anything. Well, actually the reason for not having done anything with the 6.5 PRC is this is something I have done with, which is the 6.5 gap. So it's a SAWM, Remington SAWM in the 6.5 gap, which, as you can see, there's very little difference. I think the 6.5 gap that I did work with, that I did a shoot with and shot out to long distance and all that sort of stuff, probably has a little bit more power by the looks of the case and that side of things, but it's very similar to what I've already done. But I decided to do the 6.5 PRC in this rifle and see what we could do. The other reason is the only reason that this rifle was initially in Western Australia had appearance laws on the firearms. So everything about the pistol grip, the barrel guard, the whole chassis look of the rifle was off. That got changed, the appearance laws got taken away. This is still under the brackets of can't be licensed to an individual because it has a folding stock. So when I looked at what I could do here, this has to have a folding stock. You have to fold the stock to get the bolt out to clean it. So, but then the law of the folding stock side of things is that it can be quickly detached or folded down to shorten it for concealment. Now, yes, it's not very practical, but let's not try and consider that laws in different parts of the world are logical things. It's still a long rifle. You still couldn't conceive it, all the rest of it. But okay, the folding stock side of it. But the real nature of that is you can press it with your finger. It folds down. You press it and put it back. We've had those on the channel before. It's not a feature that I have any great desire for. I'm a precision shooter, so I prefer it all to be strong and solid through there. But like I said, what I've done for this one, and it would have to go past the licensing people for someone who wanted to license this side of things, and I'm not sure it would pass. But what I've actually done is the push button thing is removed. This is now a bolt. You need a spanner. I'll show a close-up of a picture on the other side here. This actually has an Allen key, so you need a wrench. You need to undo that. You need to pull this pin out, and then you can push it around to then pull it out. So it's not something that no different than a normal chassis, or with even a lever action where you can use a screwdriver or whatever it is, and you can remove the butt stock type of thing. So you can pull the rifle to pieces, but it isn't made to be hand operated. You need wrenches to do it. So that's what I've done on that side of things to use it on the channel. And I should go through, well, I suppose, yeah, I plan to use it on the channel. I've already bolted on a couple of our features, and in sort of full honesty or full disclosure, the other logic to having it here is then I can show it with some of my stuff bolted onto it. That's how I'll use it for the ultimate precision, so it lets people see what they could do to their rifle. So it's a little bit of sales attached to it. But it's also, I really wanted to go through the process. The big thing that always bugged me about this rifle was a few things. The basic way it's structured together, there's a little different to what I would consider a precision rifle, and particularly this butt stock and the shape here, this big U here, which in an engineering term, if your shoulder's pushing here and the force is pushing there, you can get a little movement, a little dip from the back of the stock because of the design of this. Less issue in smaller, the 6.5 Creedmoor, I think, is where this thing first came out, but much more of an issue in the 338 Apua. But as said, I've always heard, well, the stuff that's written is about a lot of accuracy, very accurate rifles. So let me go through what I've seen. I haven't shot it yet. I haven't even done up a load. That is just simply a bullet pushed into a new case. So I haven't got to a place where I've even made it go bang yet. It's rainy, it's cloudy, so we'll be out there shortly. But let me go through and tell you about this rifle to start off with. Ignore this bit at the moment. Start off with, that's my bipod system with the component D, the low component D, and I've got my bag slider on it, so that, or the slider on it, so you know it's set up to be able to go through and use that with a monopod or whatever, shooting out of a bag, all set up to use in that format. And I've got the little Veldata on the top of it, just for some eye candy. The little IOR Veldata scope on it, which is, this is a, I've forgotten exactly, it's a 16 by 56, so it's a fixed power, really good budget sort of object, and it's set up in an air attack base. So I'll be able to zero it in like this, and whether I use this scope or not, it's just there so it looks like a whole rifle where it's got all the bits and pieces. And of course, it's not loaded, just has a magazine in there, once again, to make it look right. Otherwise, apart from this mod here and some stuff I've done, which I'll talk about, this rifle is stock. So well, listen, I'll start with what I had to do to it. And when I say had to do to it, I wasn't super happy how it showed up. This is a brand new rifle out of the box that I got here, and to start off with, when I first got it, I was immediately a little happier than I thought I'd be, because most of this stuff down the back here, there is some plastic and bits and pieces which I prefer not to use plastic the way they have, but there's a lot of metal in here, a lot more aluminium sort of stuff. This looks a lot like your Ruger Precision, like your RPR in the rimfire, but that's very plasticky and sort of very rattly. This is a fair bit better on the back end side of things, but a lot of these components were all metal, which was really good. I was really happy with that side of things. And there's a decent weight to the firearm without getting carried away, but that was nice. The first thing I did when I pulled out of the box, after a quick look and inspection on things, is I put the bolt in there, and I was immediately very disappointed. There was a problem. Maybe it's just this rifle. I suspect it's, well, listen, I don't know. I've read that people talk about the bolt being notchy. Well, after that, after I got it, I went, wait a minute, that feels terrible. And what was actually wrong in that situation is that when I went to it got to about here, and it would, if you're moving with it slow, I prefer to, I don't want to just punch the bolt through. I just rolled it up here, and it would jam. We'd get to that point, it would jam to the point where you actually had to hit it forward. You rack it, pull it back up, it wouldn't come out. You had to yank it back. If you ran it fast, it was fine. So an operator running out of the magazine, just running through and running back, let's see it work fine. It got around the problem. As the moment you slow down and get to the point where you went a bit fluent and just pulled it up or pushing it in, it would jam to a point where you had to force it. Took me a little bit to figure it out, pulled it to pieces a few times and put it back together, but it was actually, there's a little locking plate, you'd call it. It's on a spring. It's on the top of the little J-action spring, or people who know about the Ruger trigger is in there, that locks into the back of the receiver to stop the trigger moving back, and then there's one bolt that holds it on the front. A interesting feature, I don't know where it really comes from, but it's the same sort of thing on the rimfire. What was actually happening, took me a little bit of figuring it all out and cleaning things up, but was that little locking plate, it's I think ultimately shaped a little bit wrong. It doesn't quite match up with the bolt, and it was getting the road. Now this just goes in and out and it's nice and smooth, because I basically took a little bit of metal out of that little locking plate and got it to where it was sitting in the right place, and then that's nice and smooth and worked. The next thing that actually happened when I actually did it is when I went to pull the trigger, that was the trigger blade. Every time you racked it, the trigger blade would jam forward. So you had to actually pull hard to unjam the blade on the trigger, and then the trigger worked at the normal pressure. I haven't measured it. It feels 2.5, 3 pounds. And at the moment, I'm just going to use it in that format. But what I've done is just simply modify, put a little tie back in there to make the blade not go all the way forward. It still is a blade. It still works like a blade, but it doesn't jam. Don't know exactly what I have to do to fix that. I think if I carry on, I'd probably get a different trigger for the rifle, but we'll see. At the moment, that's what I did. Once I fixed those two things, then as you can see, that action is nice, it's smooth, works properly, the trigger works properly, it's all working nicely. Reasonably clean in its brake. I always run them a little bit before I go picking on them, but I did a bit of messing there to figure that out. Then I obviously made this little bit back here where I removed that to make it so that I have a way to use that in what I think would be a licensable thing, because this is no longer a simple folding stock. It's a wrench to get the stock out of the road to do the cleaning side of things, which makes it a lot less convenient, but it also makes it probably a little bit firmer lock-up with what I've done that, which I like as well. Then I'll go into, I suppose, a little bit of the design of the rifle. It's called, obviously, a Ruger precision rifle, but I would sort of say it's designed nothing like the normal precision rifle. I'm not saying it's not going to be precise for all those people with one that just got offended. I just would refer to the fact that it's designed quite differently. Where a precision rifle is generally designed where you'll have a stock or a chassis that the action bolts to, and then the barrel comes away from, and then that the chassis is what everything's attached to. The chassis or the stock is where your shoulder sits and everything works. So it works through that process. This is not designed like that at all. And I suppose I'll go through what that is. This has some attachments. Basically everything bolts to the receiver. So this little piece bolts to the receiver. There's a couple of plates that go around the trigger. The trigger bolts to the receiver. The front end bolts to the receiver. So the barrel guard and your arca rail and things under here, they just bolt to receiver. The buttstock, there's a little clamp system here, and there is a bolt point that goes basically around the trigger, but basically clamps to the back of the receiver here. And then your buttstock works on the back of it. And then we've got this buttstock, like I've already said, don't like some of the shapes attached to it. So it's quite different. The good feature that attached to the design of this, and I'm not an AR person, I haven't done enough with them, but there's some similar design to this, and this is really out of the design of semi-automatic rifles, where there is the straight line of push that I really like, where in an AR, obviously a buffer tube, but this actually everything butts together here. So this butts it clamps to the receiver, this butts to that butts to that butts to that. So there's a straight line of push. Well, until this point, and then we're going down and back again, but there's a nice straight line of push immediately behind the force of the barrel. So in that concept, that's in a nice place. For those that don't realize, that was where they went in semi-automatics, or fully automatics particularly, a very long while ago in the military side of things, so that when they were on continual fire, rather than that what in our world is just muzzle ride, in their world, in fully automatic, ends up where the rifle shoots over the top. By having that straight line of push there, it keeps on shooting in roughly the right place, because it's not trying to rise, it's not trying to dip, it keeps pushing the same places. So that's why it really came about, that sort of thing. And you see it in military firearms quite a bit, but it's just exactly the same logic. And this is using this logic. Actually, this buffer tube in here lets the back of all this is a plastic section on the back of the bolt. Plastic or aluminium, I don't know, I haven't actually checked it, I think it's plastic. But on the back of the bolt that goes right back up to here when you pull the bolt back. That's also why it needs to be folding to get the bolt out, because there's no gap in here to get that bolt out. You need to get it out of the road to do that process. So that turns into a nice bit of the design, but like I said, quite unlike like the normal precision rifle. That doesn't mean it's bad. I would probably like to have not so much butting as in actually bolted and fixed and that side of things, but time will tell. That's one of the things I'll be testing, what I can really see out of it. And what the internet has already told me is they're very nice and accurate. I don't always trust the internet, even though I'm on the internet, but anyway, that's that process. In the back here, like I've said, this bit here and this is simple nature. If you can imagine, if this bends in here, what's actually going to do is it's going to lower a little bit to do that. So you could end up with some slight inconsistencies out of this design here. There's been no evidence of it. This is probably more an aesthetic / engineering thing for me, where I don't like that shape there. It does feel really reasonably nice and strong. It is a little bit wriggly because of the way the whole thing bolts together. It uses this little rail down the bottom here to stop things twisting. It's not quite as solid as I like. I don't really like the thread by thread increments of how you adjust things, but it's also then very practical to be adjust very quickly. Really nice, and certainly we use a similar sort of thing on the little the rimfire on the 22 Magnum in the rigger precision rimfire. So swapping from me to Sam, being able to get the eye relief right for the two of us for 5'1.5" and 6'4", it's very nice and simple for the changeover side of things. Not a feature I generally would go with suitable for a precision rifle. I'd prefer to be fixed, and the quick adaptability is less a thing than the rigidity and strength of it all. But let's see. What I think I'm going to do is build a little spacer that then sits in here, and I adjust it to that spacer fits on to where I shoot it, and when Sam wants to shoot it, which she will as well, it'll be able to go down to, I think, where it's fully collapsed is what's going to suit her. So, and that's still going to work properly, but I will probably do that bit there. And then we'll see. The depth of this sort of stuff, it's all made to suit, very, I suppose, everybody friendly. To me, it's not quite deep enough, but it actually, with that thing there, you can bolt on whatever you want. And like I said, I could have one of my normal bag riders on there. I've got my little slider here, which is the bearing block system in here, and that's also going to mean that I'll be able to use it in a really tactical form with the likes of the monopod on the back of it. But equally, I'm going to run it like this to test this thing in the way of using that little slider system in the bags or in my adjustable bag base. But we'll see how all that runs. And ultimately, I could change that, but you'd always need to have this buffer tube in here in some form or other. You could shorten that plastic piece in there and run less buffer tube, but hey, listen, let's just work with what it's got to start off with. Up the front, like I said, rather than bolt into the chassis so much, this bolts to the fore-end, bolts to the receiver. No negatives to that, probably even a little positive in the fact it is so, because it is a bolt together thing, it then becomes bolted to the actual receiver itself, so the action. I have mounted on, it worked nicely in the way of when I was setting it up, I was using an Arca rail system, so it has a full Arca rail in it with M-lock in the center of it, so we have bolt to it, whatever you want. It also comes with a Picatinny rail that you can bolt in there, so you could really run whatever you want here. I've set it up with my bipod system. So this is my super low component D with just a couple of M-locks in here and mounted. Then I run my component A. I've got my solid long legs. So that's going to shoot. I really like how my system works, but really could run any system. And then I can also, with the Arca rail, run tripod sort of stuff, which we will do all the bits and pieces through here. So all that is going to work fine. It's a 1/8 twist barrel, 26-inch long, has their muzzle brake. I presume going to work reasonably well. I will run my own muzzle brake on it, at least when I get to the prone shooting in the dirt, because this will have, by the design of things, a certain amount of blast to the ground. And I'd like to have my component on there anyway, but I'll start with this muzzle brake and we'll see how everything runs with it. I see they have a lot bigger design with some ports on the top of it, notably in their Magnum stuff, which I would suggest would be actually counteracting this area here, but I don't know. I haven't got one here, so I should stop talking out of my spot. But we'll see. That's pretty much it. So the whole bit of the rifle, it is quite a different way to do it. I presume, from my lack of knowledge, actually, there's some similarities to how the likes of the AR-15s and bits and pieces. Certainly, that's the look of the side of things there. But as for the term precision rifle, I think that's much more marketing, because it's much more a sort of a tactical / very user-friendly, very one-size-fits-all sort of combination is what they've built here. But the next thing I'll do, the next time that we'll be talking about this rifle at least, will be actually having gone out and shot it, run it, tested it, talk about the 6.5 PRC, and yes, in comparison to this is essentially a slightly improved 6.5 SORM, but it's actually the 6.5 Gap. And yeah, talk about triggers and all the rest of it. It obviously, on the back here, just has these plastic AR pistol grip. Not a huge fan of them, but they work fine. I'll probably end up putting an MDT on there or something that's a little more just familiar, and I like the look of them. They're aesthetically pleasing and feel a little nicer in the hand. They've got a little bit nicer of a palm swell, a little bit nicer fit to this thing. That's about it at the moment. Our last bit is I think this is, I haven't checked this, but it is just the standard rail. I'll run all my scopes with the air attack base, so then I can set them all up to get 0 and a full, the full amount of internal elevation, and we'll stretch this thing out to the mile and beyond. But let's see. It's it looks like a nice rifle. That's my take on it for this second. And listen, I hope that's worth something to you. Thanks very much for checking in. We'll catch you next time.